Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, social media can be used in so many different ways when it comes to politics, and politics seems to always be a hot topic no matter the time of year, whether it's a political cycle or not. Today, Bob from Liberty Minds, one of my favorite Facebook pages, joins me to discuss politics, religion, and everything in between.
Let's go. Yeah. Left, right, left, right, left. We got our marching orders, man. Left, right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live.
Bob, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is cool. What I like to do with people new to the show, just get a little background of you, whatever you want folks to know about you. Then we'll just get into the topic. We're going to talk politics, and I know you tell me you're a Christian, so that's going to be interesting to talk to you about it since we're a Christian podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get after it.
Sure. I'm a family man, married, 4 kids, been married for over 20 years at this point. I'm a consultant. I work in sales and marketing and live in California.
How do you feel about living? Have you always been in California your whole life? Or
So I grew up in California and I moved away when I was 17. And I thought I would never go back. I didn't particularly dislike it, but, a lot of people just want to get out of their hometown, right? And so I've lived all over. I've lived in the Mountain West, in the Southeast, in the Northeast. I've lived outside of the country a couple times and then moved back during COVID, actually. And I didn't think I liked it because I was a kid wanting to leave. And now that I'm back as an adult, I like it better than any other place in the country, to be honest. So yeah.
Really? Yeah, that is interesting too, because what we always hear, I've been in the South my whole life, and we always hear that just how bad California is, and everybody's leaving California. And
yeah.
It's just something you hear, and just something that's, the talk about, California, they call it California, but hearing you say that it's not that bad, or you'd rather be there than anywhere else. That's interesting, because especially with the mindset that you have as a liberty-minded type person.
Well, it's a lot of things, because on the page, actually, to kind of bring it back to the topic, people are often like, why do you live here if you hate it so much? And I'm like, I don't hate it. I like living here. I also liked when I lived in Central America. I also liked when I lived in Europe. I tend to like where I live. I liked when I lived in the Southeast. I like when I live in the Northeast. I liked living all these places. And so I don't like what the government's doing in all of these places. But here in California, the weather doesn't get better. The people are awesome. There's so much different cultural variety. There's so much different food. There's so much stuff to do with beach and water stuff and mountains. And Liberty people don't like hearing this. I don't own guns, so I don't even know what the gun laws are. So that doesn't affect me. And so that part doesn't affect me. People talk a lot about how, oh yeah, the taxes are so bad and this and that. But the reality is, it's way overblown. People talk about how San Francisco's an incredible city. It's awesome. Are there parts that are garbage? Yeah, absolutely. But like you say, having said that, when I lived in the Southeast, not too far from, I lived in South Carolina, I liked it there, and it was way different. When I lived in Boston, I liked it there, and it was way different. I like it all over. So, yeah.
Well, that's cool. I was sitting here thinking about it while you were talking. I know some folks that live in California, and even up in the Northwest part of the country too, that they run around in these same Christian anarchist circles that I run around in on social media, and they don't seem to be in a huge hurry to leave either.
Yeah.
So it's not, so maybe it's not as bad. I don't know. I've never been to California, so it's really hard for me to judge it. I take a lot of things these days with a grain of salt, or when I hear somebody complain about something, and I really can't trust them. But you can't trust the media about anything. If you wanted to sit and listen to Fox News all day long, they're going to bash, y'all's governor there the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Which, and he may be a horrible human being, but I don't know. I just don't. I don't trust Fox News or any corporate media for that matter. But
yeah, like I say, you talk to people, and some people hate it here, and a lot of people love it here, just like anywhere else. I heard something the other day And I think it was just a little quip, a little story, right? Like, so there's this guy sitting on a fence, and another guy starts walking into town, and he says, "Hey, I'm from the town down the road, and you know, I'm thinking about moving to this town. What are the people like?" And the guy on the fence says, "Well, what were the people like where you came from?" And he said, "Oh, they're horrible. They're awful. They cheat people. They're liars. They're mean. They're rude." And he's like, "Yep, that's what they're like in this town too." And so he keeps walking through. And then 10 minutes later, another guy comes down the road and he says, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving to this town. What are the people like?" And the guy says, "Well, what are they like where you came from?" And he said, "Oh, they're great. They're wonderful people. They're generous. They're kind." And he's like, "Hey, that's what they're like here too." And so sometimes I think you just kind of find what you're going to find based off of who you are. And that's not trying to pat myself on the back saying I'm like a great guy or anything, but I'm just saying, like, everywhere I go, I just tend to like it. You know, I find the food that I like, the activities that I like, the people that I like, and I just tend to like it wherever I go.
Hey folks, do you like salsa? I love salsa. I have come up with a fire recipe, and we have been shipping this homemade salsa all across the country. If you like salsa and want a cool way to support the project and spread the message of no king but Christ, then holler at us. You can reach us at badromansalsa@gmail.com or visit the official Bad Roman Salsa Facebook page and message us there. Thank y'all so much for your continued support. Now let's get back to the show. All right, let's talk a little bit about Liberty Minds. And so I'm kind of curious, and you could go as far with this as you want. What is your background as far as politics? Have you always had this liberty mindset? Were you always, I don't know, I hesitate to call you an anarchist because I don't know for sure. I know that you are very liberty leaning, but are you libertarian liberty or like anarchist liberty? But where did you start from? Because I've told my story quite a bit on the show, from neoconservatism to Christian anarchy, which is quite a leap. I was actually talking to some folks out at the farmers market today about it that I intended to sell some salsa, and that's always an interesting topic. But you meet a lot of freedom loving people out of these farmers markets. Now, some of them go about it the wrong way, but they've got an inkling towards freedom. But I'm really kind of curious about your background, where you kind of came from as to where you're at now.
Yeah, and it's changed. You know, I think, was it today? Was it Muhammad Ali? Anyways, I read a quote today. What was it? It was something like, "If you see the world the same way when you're 20 or when you're 50 as you do when you're 20, you just wasted 30 years." And so, you know, hopefully I feel different, you know, a few years from now, and hopefully I feel different a few years from that. But I feel like my mindset has shifted a great deal. So, like, I grew up not thinking about politics even a little bit, not even a little bit. And I knew that my parents were Republican. They are great people, but I knew that they were Republican, and so I feel like probably a lot of that rubbed off, you know, through osmosis or whatever. Growing up, didn't think anything about it. I remember something changing when Obama first was campaigning to come in. So 2007, 2008, right?
Yeah.
I was a few years into owning a business, and I was starting to feel like a grown up and stuff like that. And I started listening to talk radio. And I listened to Hannity. I listened to Sean Beck. I think I listened to some Rush Limbaugh. And I got angry at Obama. And, like, you know, Obama, he's the socialist devil. And I got swept up in it. And so I remember being like, man, these guys are right. Like, these liberals, they're big government. That's not the right way to do things, and blah, blah, blah. And so as I would listen to them, I don't think I ever called myself a Republican. I think I would have called myself a conservative at the time, because I don't think I liked the notion of, like, to me, Republican felt old and stodgy, and like my parents and my grandparents. So I don't think I would have called myself a Republican, but probably a conservative. And I listened to talk radio for probably about a year. One thing that I believe is important to me, like a lot of, you know, we all have our own identities about ourselves, and I believe that I value consistency a lot, to where I believe one of the things that I really don't like is hypocrisy. And I keep saying I believe because I'm sure that I'm not consistent with that. that I make mistakes and that I've got blind spots. But I believe that I value consistency a lot. And so I would hear them make these arguments against the dang liberals, but then I would be like, but wait, you guys are doing it too. Like, you conservatives are doing it too. And you Republicans are doing it too. And so I'm not one that got swept in by Ron Paul. And I remember why, actually. Like, sometimes I have a hard time remembering things, but like, I remember I was a big Glenn Beck fan, and Glenn Beck really went after Ron Paul. And so, like, he really influenced me to like not like Ron Paul. And so anyways, I wasn't one of these folks that kind of came in at that time through Ron Paul, but it was around probably 2009, maybe a year into Obama, when I was like, yeah, I still don't like what the liberals are doing, but I really don't like what these conservatives are doing. I think there wasn't a whole lot of discourse politically that I saw on Facebook. There probably was, but I wasn't a part of it at the time. And so I was testing out these ideas just internally, right? Like, just thinking about them and probably reading articles and stuff, but I don't know that I was having a lot of discourse about it anywhere, because I don't know that there was much of a space for that to occur. Maybe I was a little bit on Facebook, but I don't recall a lot. Except, well, no, there was a little bit. Like, I was friends with these two people. One of them, on Facebook, she was a big liberal, and I would get in arguments with her. This was, again, 2000, probably 2009. And we had a mutual friend who was an admin at Liberty Minds at the time. And so at this time, like I say, so probably 2010, 2011, I started calling myself a libertarian, probably started thinking myself very much right-wing libertarian. I remember the election with Romney coming around, and just being like disgusted with both, and like, ugh, I don't want either of these guys to win. So I remember by at least 2012 for sure, I was like, no, I'm decidedly not a conservative. I'm decidedly not a liberal. I think I'm a libertarian, more right-leaning, A few years later, here comes Trump, and really switched everything again, because all of these right-leaning libertarians who I thought were small government, and I look back and realize now that they never were, probably, but like, I thought they championed the little guy, and I thought that they cared about, the minority, and any minority, right? Like, being oppressed by the majority. Suddenly I start seeing all these guys start throwing in with Trump, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, this guy is obviously, an absolute nightmare, for liberty. At that point, 2016 and on, I really started seeing my Christianity manifest more into how I thought about this stuff. I was born and raised a Christian. I started seeing more of that start to manifest, like, because oftentimes I feel like a lot of people compartmentalize things. It's easy to compartmentalize things, right? Like, I'm a Christian and I'm a Republican, and those are two separate things, but they try to conflate them, but they're two very separate things. And I started realizing, my Christianity needs to be dictating how I actually feel about these things. And that started shifting me. And so um, these days, a lot of people call me a left winger. I I don't know that I am. I really start hating putting labels on things, because once you start putting labels, that's what people want to argue against. They don't want to argue against, like, they don't have a discussion of the topic. They just want to, like, oh, you're a left winger and that makes you bad, or you're a right winger that makes you bad, or whatever. So, anyways, that was kind of my genesis of having no clue, to probably being a conservative, to probably being a libertarian, to definitely starting. I think I'm an anarchist. To I'm very much a believer in markets. I'm not an ANCAP by any means. You know how years ago, like, communists were always being like criticized by like ANCAPs, like, with the phrase like, oh, that wasn't real communism. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, people would criticize communists, for what happened in USSR, for what happened in China, and the communists would say, hey, that's not real communism. And then again, my need for consistency, I started, like, because there was a time I considered myself an ANCAP. And then I started seeing, like, myself using that same argument. People would say, look at all these bad things that capitalism's doing. And I would be like, oh, that's not real capitalism. It's not real capitalism because the state exists, and it's not real. And then I was realizing, like, oh, wait, I'm doing the same thing that the communists do, that I was just criticizing them for. And so it made me realize, like, look, maybe it wasn't real communism, because I don't think real communism is ever going to exist, because people are flawed. They're never going to be like ideal purists. And at the same time, I don't know that real capitalism is ever going to exist. So all we can do is look at how closely these ideologies approximate to, what they claim to be.
Right.
When you look at it that way and say, yeah, I get that it's not real capitalism, but man, it's done a whole lot of damage to a whole lot of people. And I get that it's not real communism, but it's done a whole lot of damage to a whole lot of people. And so where does that leave me? I don't know, like, because I'm not into capitalism, but I do like markets, and I like, market-based solutions. I'm not into communism, but I'm very attracted to the notion of what can we do for the poor? What can we do for, what can we do for the needy? What can we do for those that are rejected by society? The types of folks that Jesus would have sat with.
Right.
The trans people that are getting crapped on, the immigrants that are getting crapped on, the poor, the homeless that are getting crapped on, like.
Right.
Those are the folks that I think Jesus would have been sitting with the most. And the more that I seem to care about those folks, the more I get called a left winger. But I'm also not like trying to, capture the means of production or anything. So like, I'm like, I don't know that I'm a left winger. And then anyways, I'm talking a lot. Is that making sense what I'm trying to say?
Oh yeah, well, no, it makes perfect sense to me, because that sounds so similar to me.
Yeah.
And how I kind of got to where I'm at today, because 2016 was the last time I ever voted, and I haven't looked back. I have no issue. I have no plans of ever voting again. But the whole idea of your Christianity should be dictating how you're looking at these things, and that's exactly what I started doing too. But you said something also too about Sean Hannity and watching that stuff. I used to fall asleep watching Fox News, man. I'm not lying. And I would listen to Hannity. I would listen to him. And now when I see him, like I can't believe anybody still listens to this guy.
It's insane, right? Like when you look at it, you're like, how was I taken in by that, right?
I don't. I can't, because that's the way I am too. I look at it, I'm like, what did I see in this?
Yeah.
But they were saying what I wanted to hear. That's all it is.
Yeah. And you were a different person then, right? So they were talking to the person that you were at the time.
Right.
And you've evolved, right? You've gotten better. That's what the gospel's about, right? Is just getting better.
Yeah.
And helping those around us to get better in any way that we can. And so anyways, that's where I say, what am I going to be calling myself in 5 years? I don't know. But yeah.
Well, and two, you said something about ANCAPs. When I first got into these circles, people were calling me an ANCAP, and I had no idea what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the longer I've been running around in these circles and you talk to people, I'm not an ANCAP.
Right.
I feel like ANCAPs, and I've said it on the show, I've said it on social media, I think ANCAPs have a tendency to revert back into statism.
Well, yeah.
I've seen it over and over. You were talking about some of those other libertarians who you thought were for those in need, started backing Trump. They turned around and did it again this year. Yeah. 2024. They did it all again. And I don't know at what point do libertarians start calling these people out? And I'm talking about people that they look at these people like they're golden calf of the libertarians, of libertarian circles. You can't speak against these people, otherwise you're speaking against their golden calf.
Yeah.
I have no problem speaking against it. You said something about hypocrisy earlier. I have no problem speaking against when people are being hypocritical. I'm going to call you out. Especially if you're claiming to be a Christian, especially if you're claiming to be liberty-minded, I have no problem calling you out. I'm going to do it with love. I'm not going to go beat you over the head with the Bible. I'm not going to go beat you over the head with anything like that. But I'm not going to be quiet either, because at some point everybody's got to start calling these people out. Now I view a lot of these folks in the libertarian circles as nothing but grifters. And it seems like libertarians are very easily manipulated by grifters. I've seen it over and over and over.
And I think an important thing is to realize that this is the human condition, right? It's like all of us can be taken in. You and I have been taken in by grifters.
100%.
And I think it's often important to examine, am I being taken in by grifters right now? Always, always be looking and checking yourself to make sure that, that you're not falling, because Yeah, I think I'm right. Like, I always joke with my wife because if I ever get in an argument with my wife, she's like, "You always think you're right," and I'm like, "Well, yeah. Who walks around thinking they're wrong? Like, of course I think I'm right." But at the same time, I can look back at so many times when I know I've been wrong, and I've got to be like, okay, try to stay as humble as you can because I think I'm right about like my beliefs right now, but I'm not perfect. I'm sure I'm doing something wrong.
Well, we're not always going to get it 100% right. I think the whole point is to just learn from those mistakes and then and try to be better the next day. I mean, I'm by no means a perfect human being. I like to think that I'm right all the time too, and I believe that if everybody just listened to what Craig had to say, then this world would be a whole lot better place.
Right?
That's how I feel.
Exactly.
And I have no problem saying that out loud.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
So, are you the only Christian on the Facebook page, or do you or other ones as well?
There's a couple. I want to say they're. So yeah, I'm doing a mental inventory of who we are because we've got a little Facebook chat, and that's actually my favorite part of the page is just the chat we have with the admins. I haven't met any of them in person, but I have become very close to these folks. And so I want to say three of us are Christians, three of us are not. I believe the other three are. I believe they're atheists. We talk about this stuff all the time because they'll kind of, if a Christian's doing something stupid, they'll kind of like kind of rib me about it in in our little group chat and stuff like that. Where I hope that and I believe that they respect me is I have no issue recognizing that Christianity, where I find it to be a beautiful, lovely thing, how it's, a lot of people have used it as a weapon to harm so many people.
100%.
And yeah, and so I don't have any issue saying that, and they know that, and so I believe that they respect my brand of Christianity, even though they might think I'm a little bit nuts. Maybe I am, but all of us who believe in Christianity or any sort of religion that we can't see, touch, or feel. Well, I think we can feel it, but like if we can't see or touch it or whatever, maybe we're all a little bit nuts to be doing something like that. But I think that they can I think they respect the brand of Christianity that I'm trying to be.
We've been doing this project for 5 years now. And I've talked to atheists on the show. I've talked to atheists in private conversation. And some of these folks are some of the nicest people you'll ever come across. And I've talked to Christians in real life who are some of the nastiest people you're going to come across. That's one of the hangups too. They look at the teachings of Christ and what Jesus was saying and seeing how Christians are behaving, and that they're going to have a hard time believing anything you're saying because you're going against the words of Christ. You're claiming to be a follower. I was talking to a girl. I don't remember this has been, I don't know, a couple years ago maybe now, but I posted something. Can't remember what it was, but it had something to do with Jesus, and she basically came on. It wasn't even. It was just my personal page. She's an atheist. She was an obvious atheist, but calling it fake and this and that. I said, okay, let's do this. Let's just say that you're right. Let's say this is all fake. I've lost my mind by following somebody that I can't see. What have I lost by following the very basic teachings of Christ of love your neighbor and love your enemy? I don't feel like I've lost anything.
Well, and I would agree with that. I think the problem is some people lose their soul in because their following of Jesus leads them to places where they're harming people because they believe that that's what Jesus would do. And this ultimately is a topic that I think about a lot because at the end of the day, everyone who professes to be a Christian is using a very similar book. There's various translations of the Bible, but we're all using a very similar book. But we're obviously all coming to very different conclusions, incredibly different conclusions from the exact same words.
Yeah.
And so not one of us is the arbiter. Not one of us is the one that is like, no, my version's always going to be right. Like, I figured it out. You guys are idiots. You're so dumb for not figuring it out because I did. Like, that's not a thing. And so what I'm always realizing, the truth is, a lot of people say, oh, well, you got to follow Jesus's words. Okay, well, how come you doing it is so different? At the end of the day, we're all creating Jesus in the image that we want Jesus to be in. And people can disagree with that as much as they'd like, but it's the truth. Because if there was a concrete idea of who Jesus was, we wouldn't have tens of thousands of versions of Jesus. And so all of us are creating a form of Jesus. And so for me, what I'm always trying to examine and like self-diagnose is, who is the Jesus that I'm creating? Is he somebody that is anxious to go to war? Is he somebody that's anxious to attack the immigrant? Is he somebody that's anxious to grind the face of the poor? Is he somebody that's like really trying to harm people in society? Or is he somebody that's trying to welcome everybody with open arms? And so at the end of the day, my theology is not going to be perfect. Yours is not going to be perfect. No one's going to have the right theology. There's no real ability for anyone to say, well, I'm a true Christian and you're not. Like, you can't do that, because like who's to say that? All I can really do is examine, is the Christ that I'm building one that is beautiful, and one that is helpful, and one that is loving and kind? And I know I'm not always kind. That's one of the things I got to fix. But is that the Christ that I'm building, or am I building Republican Christ who likes to attack immigrants and likes to, go after trans people and likes to go after anybody who's not like them? Like, is that, who am I building? And so ultimately, if the Republicans were right the whole time and their Jesus is the right one, keep me away from that Jesus. I don't want anything to do with that one.
Yeah, I have no interest in that. I have no interest in that guy. I mean, because I used to be completely interested in that guy.
Yeah, me too.
That was another thing too. It was such a shock to my system whenever I started my eyes kind of started opening up to all of the stuff that I used to believe was just horrible. I was out at a farmer's market today, and I had some really cool conversations with some of the other vendors, and even customers coming up to buy salsa. And I talked to he's a pastor of a home church. He's a beekeeper, and he makes his own honey and stuff. But I was talking to him about it, and he wants to sit down and have some coffee. I've been really interested in the idea of a home church because I think some of the churches gotten too corporate.
Yeah,
and I don't really have any interest in it. So I'm going to meet with this guy at some point and hopefully go visit their home church. He actually lives in Germantown, where you were at.
What's important to you in a church?
I've gone so far down the rabbit hole of reading early church writings and how they engaged the Roman Empire, how they looked at the Roman Empire, that I want something like that.
Does that exist?
No,
oh,
not that I've found. So that's why it's so difficult to find a church. I could walk out my front door and throw a stone and hit a Baptist church, a Southern Baptist church that's going to have a flag on their stage.
Yeah,
and I can't deal with that. But this guy, the pastor I was talking to today, he seems to have a real understanding of no king but Christ.
Yeah.
And what they were doing, because they were looking at my booth, him and his wife, I walked by them and they hollered at me. They said, we kind of put two and two together by reading the Bad Roman, and now we understand what all that means. What was so interesting too is that people were asking me, what's the A on top of the fish? What does that mean? So in simplest terms, it just means no king but Christ.
Yeah.
But if you want to broaden it, it's Christian anarchy. And I would tell them all, I said, I know that word is freaks people out. Christian voluntarians, which is a little softer sounding, I believe. There was a time too talking about that where I thought anarchy and voluntarism were the same, but it seems to, the longer I've gone, they seem to be different things. Kind of the same ideas, but different, going about it a little bit different. It seems like anarchy is a philosophy where voluntarism is kind of putting that into action. And I may be completely wrong about that. I may have made that up on my own.
I don't know. And that's where, like I say, I feel like I've learned a lot in the last few years. And I feel like so many of the arguments that folks who want to talk about liberty get into tend to surround how we define words rather than. And so that's where all the arguments go. You're not a real anarchist. You're not a real Christian. You're not a real this, because I've determined that a real anarchist is this, and I've determined that a real Christian is that.
Right.
And so we stop talking about ideas. We stop talking about action. We stop talking about that. And we're just talking about labels.
I'm over it, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm over with the labels. I don't really call myself an anarchist that often anymore, because there's so many people call themselves an anarchist, and to me, and I'm not saying I've got it all figured out, but to me, the way they're behaving is not. I mean, if you're running for political office or voting, to me, that's not anarchy.
Yeah, well, I chuckle because I thought of myself as an ANCAP for a while, and I distanced myself from the movement, even while I think I still thought in a lot of the same policies, but I saw so many ANCAPs become Trumpers, and even if they didn't become Trumpers, just hardcore anti-Semites or hardcore, like, Nazi adjacent, stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't want to share a label with these guys. These guys are awful. And there's nice ANCAPs out there. There's ANCAPs that are great with, but too many of them, it's same thing with libertarian. I thought, there was a time when I was like, I think I still like ideologically am a libertarian, but I don't want to tell people I'm a libertarian. These people are doing horrible stuff. Like they have the most vile views. And so it does make it hard sometimes to even say a Christian, because Christians are doing crazy stuff. But ultimately, I try to, I try to talk more about ideas and actions and behaviors rather than labels. But yeah, I think I'm a Christian anarchist too. But yeah, that's going to mean something to me. It's going to mean something different to the next guy.
Right, right. And if you like to read, if you're kind of into history type stuff, man, go check out some early church writings and just see how they engaged the Roman Empire. It really kind of screwed me up for the better, because once I saw how they were doing that, it was. And I told these folks out there at the farmers market today, I said, and I tell people this all the time, if the early Christians were walking around in America right now, they would be completely confused by what's called church. They wouldn't recognize it. I've talked to people across the world on this show. Christianity in America, the American type of Christianity, it's confusing to them, because like if somebody in Australia, they don't behave that way. The Christian nationalism is a bad thing. We saw it a lot with this election. I kind of want to shift gears back to politics a little bit too, because one thing I loved about y'all's page is going there leading up to the election and watching how y'all were going back and forth against both sides. I find it so amusing too, where people cannot wrap their brain around the idea that people can be against both sides or talk against both sides and think for themselves, basically, what you're doing. And something that I was already kind of thinking on my own, but I think it may have been one of you guys, you or one of the other men, say this on one of the threads. It looked like Trump beat the pants off of Kamala Harris, right?
Mm-hmm.
What y'all said, it was not that people really love Trump. It just shows how bad the left has gotten, because I don't think many people like Trump. They just kind of held their nose to vote for him because it wasn't Kamala, because the left has gotten pretty bad.
Yeah. And I think there's some danger there too. And let me explain what I mean. The danger in just saying both sides bad, because what people hear with both sides bad is like, oh, you're just a contrarian, you have nothing to contribute, and you're just both sides bad. And that's a very intellectually lazy, like, oh, I can just say both sides are bad, and that way I never have to take a stand. Because I think some people do that. And so it's really pushed me to try to engage myself, because I was called out on that a lot. I've been called out a lot on that, on the whole quote unquote both sides bad. And it's forced me to kind of engage my beliefs and look at myself and realize I probably need to be doing more as well. And so, I signed up to kind of help with some refugees, and I signed up to like do other things, because I realized, like, yeah, both sides are bad. Like that's true. Is one side worse than the other? Often. But they're both doing really bad things. But it can be a lazy argument to just say both sides bad if I'm not trying to engage in order to improve the world around me. And it made me realize, like, I am not going to improve the world around me through voting for either of these folks, but I can help the homeless population. I can help the refugees. I can help, there's things that I can do, so that I'm not just some lazy both sides bad while I sit there and just, cast aspersions at everybody that's not as enlightened as I am, and I think that's something that we, Christian anarchists, I think that we need to be careful of that I don't think there's any harm in saying, like, look, both sides are doing these really bad things. But I think the harm comes if that's where our criticism stops and it doesn't lead to some sort of action to try to, materially and spiritually improve the lives of people, ourselves and people around us. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Oh, 100%. And I was thinking about something too. And I think I may say that sometimes, that I see both sides as bad, but also two, when I look at both sides, I don't see a whole lot of difference in the two.
Right.
I get added to political groups sometimes on Facebook, and I'm into this one that's it's just dumb. Like I watched them all fight with each other, but leading up to the election, and once Trump won, all the people on the left just kind of just went into hiding.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was like a huge echo chamber of nothing but Trump supporters, and I would go in there and I would say things, and I would say that to them. I was like, I don't see any difference in Trump or Kamala. Not a whole. If there is any, I don't see it. Maybe I'm not paying enough attention. I don't pay a whole lot of attention, but they would bring up immigration. They'd bring up the border and all this stuff. And I was like, I think Obama deported more people than Trump did. I think Biden did too. But for some reason, and I may be wrong on that. I'm not positive on that, but it seems that gets twisted in the media, and they just believe everything that they're being told through the TV.
I don't see a lot of difference in the leadership. I'll put that word in quotes: Republican leadership, Democrat leadership. I do believe that I see a difference in the people, because the way I see it, the right, or the Republicans, the conservatives, tend to want to grow the government in order to punish people. Let's grow the government for cops so that they can punish people. We can punish the people for being homeless. We can punish the people for having drug addictions. Or let's grow the military so that we can punish people overseas. And I do believe that more liberal-minded folks tend to want to grow the government in order to, hey, what drug programs can we get these people in? What housing programs can we get these people into? And so ultimately, I think leadership ends up being pretty similar as far as what they do. I do think, though, that there's a big danger in the right-wing folks right now, to where I think the Democrat folks are just the same as they've always been. They're just kind of milquetoast, and they're just kind of going along doing their thing. But I think the right is becoming far more radicalized right now, in the sense that they want to hurt people. Like, it's part of, like, and are there Democrats and liberals that want to do that? Yeah, there are. But I do believe that when we're talking about growing the state, when we're talking about growing the influence of power in these hierarchical structures, I do believe that there are more folks, at least right now, who are liberal, who are trying to, like, let's grow it so that we can provide protections. Where I do believe that especially the Christian nationalists on the right are saying, like, no, we need to grow this to hurt people. And that's not like the literal words that they're saying, but ultimately, when you look at what they're trying to do in their rhetoric, it's about hurting people. They're not trying to. They're really letting you know, hey, we're coming after the gay people and the trans people. We're coming after your immigrants. We're going to go after the Palestinians. Now, at the end of the day, if Kamala was elected, she's going to go after the Palestinians. She's going to go after the immigrants. So I think the leadership is going to do some pretty darn similar stuff, but I do think the rank and file folks, I do see a difference there. So, perhaps you and I do disagree on that one a little bit.
Well, when I said I was talking about the people in quote unquote leadership, I wasn't talking about the voters.
Gotcha.
I think one thing that I got so disappointed with because I'm 100% anti-war now, where I was 100% for it at one time, so I think what's been so disappointing through all this, because Obama was a warmonger, Biden was a warmonger, even if Biden didn't know what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it seemed like the anti-war left just disappeared. That was pretty disappointing to watch.
I agree. That's so disappointing. And it was so disappointing. And that's where I went hard after and I was pretty open. Like, look, I think if we're talking lesser of two evils, I think Kamala is the lesser of two evils. But I was so disappointed to see these folks who, call themselves champions of civil liberties and all sorts of stuff like that, also being the exact same folks that were like, nope, just turn away from the genocide, and we'll address that later. It's like, no, that's the only thing that needs to be addressed right now. People are being, like, slaughtered, and your person's doing it. And so it was so disappointing. It's disappointing that the Christians supported on the right. It's so disappointing that the liberals, tacitly supported on the left, or enthusiastically supported on the left. But yeah.
There's a progressive pastor. I had him on the show here a while back, and his Facebook page, I would go. They were all Kamala Harris all the time, and there's another Faith on the Fringe Facebook page was all Kamala all the time. And I'm like, yeah, Trump's a horrible person. I get it. But y'all are supporting somebody who is going to continue genocide.
Yeah.
And you're calling yourself Christians.
Yeah.
You know, what happened? Because you're so terrified of Trump that you're willing to turn a blind eye to somebody who is going to slaughter babies.
Yeah,
it's frustrating. It got really frustrating. I mean, you said something a while ago about being a nicer person. I was not nice to some of these people.
Yeah,
I didn't cuss them out, but I was pretty firm with them too. I said, y'all are responsible for the death of these babies.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. And part of me says I do need to be nicer, and then the other part of me is like, well, here's how I look at it. You know, Christ could be pretty forward, but at the same time, I got to be careful about that because Christ was coming at it from a perfect understanding and a perfect love. I don't have a perfect understanding and a perfect love, so I can't necessarily emulate Christ in how he was, you know, firm and tough with people because I don't have the same insight that he does. So anyways, but I get what you're saying because like, yeah, I was just frustrated. I've been so frustrated, and frankly, I'm so frustrated all around. Like, and I know people joke about leaving the country. We were trying to leave the country. We had our visas to leave the country in 2020. We were tired of it. We were getting out. We got our visas. We were going to move over to Europe. COVID came and we lost our visas, so we didn't end up moving. But what I'm getting at is it seems like we're living in a time, and I don't want to be defeatist or nihilistic or anything, but it seems like we're living in a time to where like it doesn't matter what's happening. The poor and the meek of the earth are just going to get hammered by the United States of America.
Right.
Doesn't matter who we're voting in. It's just going to happen. And I'm just so tired of like having anything to do with that. And so yeah, I'd like to get out. I'd like to move away, whether Kamala won or Trump won, and it's something that's on my mind. I don't know if my wife's up for it again, but because we used to live in Central America, and
that's one of their favorite things to say. If you don't like it, you can leave it or move to Somalia or something like that. And I always come back with them. I was like, why would I want to move somewhere where I could become a victim of American foreign policy? Why would I do that to myself? That's stupid.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to kind of flourish where you're planted, right? Like help others.
Right. Well, and also too, when they say that, I would also tell them too, I said, you really underestimate my willingness to leave this godforsaken country. I hear Mexico's nice these days. Y'all want to talk about all those folks from Mexico coming into the country? I want to go down there and check out Mexico sometimes.
Mexico's awesome. I could happily live in Mexico for the rest of my life.
I know a lot of people that's moved down there, man. They love it. I have not heard, and I had her name is, Lily, I can't remember. I had her. She used to live in Acapulco. I don't know where she's at now, but I asked her about, how bad it is. She goes, I was from Ohio. She goes, there's bad things that happen in Ohio. It doesn't matter where you go. There's going to be bad things that happen.
Yeah.
So she really had a pretty level head on her shoulders. Hey, folks. We have set up a very simple way to donate to the Bad Roman Project through spotfund.com. Just go to SpotFund and search No King But Christ. This has become necessary to continue to provide a quality podcast and keep production costs down as well. Just $5 or $10 a month will go a long way in helping us keep this project going and continue spreading the very basic message of No King But Christ. So if you like what we were doing and can find it within your budget, go to spotfund.com and search No King But Christ, and you can set up monthly donations or even donate one time. Any and all donations help more than you know, and as always, any donations above production costs will go directly to charities in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank y'all so much. Now back to the show. I want to ask you one more question. We kind of alluded to it a little bit, or was kind of leading into it. I'll ask you one more question. I'll let you get out there and get back to your family. When you look at the state, and there was a lot, there was a time where I would consider myself a collapsitarian, and I might still be. I don't know. It's one of those labels I don't really care about anymore. But do you think? And this is kind of where I've come to now. This is where Craig is at the time of this recording. Okay, I used to believe that we're going to see the fall of the empire in our lifetime, or either our children's lifetime or their lifetime. I felt like it wasn't that far away. Now, I don't think it's going to fall until Jesus comes back. that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm just kind of curious, with you as a Christian and kind of a liberty-minded, or not kind of, but liberty-minded Christian, where do you even think about stuff like that, or do you just not worry about it?
That's a really good question. And I try not to worry about it because I have no control over it. And I just be a good person, try to plan and try to, take care of my kids and all that good stuff. So I try not to think about like, the fall of the empire, because a big part of me wants it to fall, right? But I also recognize that oftentimes the fall coincides with an enormous amount of pain and suffering.
Right.
And so do I want that to happen? Do I want, just some nice collapsing fall because, there's some big old events that make that happen? And I don't know. I definitely don't want people hurt. I know that much. And so I don't know, man. It seems like every year two things concurrently happen. The United States slips further into insolvency economically and in every way possible. The United States just gets worse, but at the same time somehow figures out a way to like exert violence and power on others to keep going. And so like it seems like it's insolvent. It seems like, but at the same time, this behemoth just keeps moving forward and like existing and living. And it seems almost impossible. And I have to believe that there is a breaking point there. That if Jesus does come back, and I think the American empire would fall before that, personally, if that's the thing. And I don't know how much I believe in the literal return of Jesus. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't know. I'm very much a believer that the kingdom of heaven is inside of us, and what we really need to be doing is creating our heaven here. And is that the return? I don't know. That's starting to get deep into doctrine and philosophy and stuff like that. But anyways, long story short, I don't know how much more legs this empire has.
I don't either.
That's one of the other reasons I kind of want to get out. I see some of these Latin American countries getting a lot stronger. And not that I want Latin American countries to get stronger. I want people to be doing well. But I see how their economies are growing. And I see how there's more, unique stuff happening, and it makes me want to be a part of that and just leave this behind, frankly. But yeah, we'll have to see, right?
Yeah, we'll have to see. Well, are you guys only on Facebook, or are you all like on X or Instagram, anything like that?
I think the owner of the page, I think he has an Instagram and a Twitter for this, but I've never been on them, and I don't think that they're used very often. I think it's just Facebook, so maybe we'll need to do more with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, y'all have a much larger audience than we do as far as the followers and subscribers, but that being said, our Facebook page is our largest audience. Now we do okay on Instagram sometimes, but I don't know. Social media is kind of it's just an outlet. It's to put the podcast out there and talk about what's on our mind and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I think that conversations like this are cool. But so go ahead, if you want to go ahead and plug anything you want to plug, and then I'll let you get out of here.
Oh no, I appreciate you having me on, and I agree. Like for me, this is just intellectually fun. Because I don't have folks in my daily life that I talk about this kind of stuff with. I don't know if you do, but I don't. So for me, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to have an outlet on Facebook and play around with these ideas and then get back to the real world. But yeah, I don't have anything to plug. I just really appreciate being on and you being a gracious host and letting me jabber for a while.
That was fun. I've been very curious about who's running the page and who's on it, because y'all are pretty private about that. Y'all keep that private intentionally, and I respect that about you guys. And so I was always curious. I actually, honestly, when I first thought about it, asking you guys, one of y'all to come on or all of y'all to come on, I was expecting a hard no, to be honest with you. So I was really happy when you agreed to come on, especially since we have a lot of similarities, man. So. If you ever want to just chat sometime, holler at me, dude, and we'll sit and chat, and just need to talk to somebody who's kind of like-minded like you are.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's a great thing that you're doing, so keep it up, and we really enjoy your page too, so thank you.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate you guys too, but I'm going to let you get out here and let you get back to your family. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.